I don't really mind chaos. From my existential perspective, chaos isn't something to make sense of. And I'm starting to believe the sooner you stop fearing chaos, the sooner you can appreciate being a part of it. Some players were cheating, for lack of a better word, and it was against the rules. They were doing it anyway, obviously, and these actions would put their account at risk. Getting caught could lead to permanent expulsion from the world, and any complacency on Francisco's part could get him in trouble too. And we weren't looking for trouble. In fact, there was an endless font of new responsibilities and tasks pouring from Francisco's phone. But the reward for these varied tasks was not worth the break in mindfulness or risk to innocent bystanders. Every single opportunity seemed like spam or a scam, a trick to goad Francisco into reckless or dangerous behavior for a short-term gain, leading only to more risk, danger, and more short-term gain. Which is why you might think it odd that we are heading to the casino. I had begun to prefer taxis for several reasons. I liked the peaceful ride that Francisco was not socially responsible for. The taxi would often follow the optimized traffic route, allowing for a fun, meditative journey. The game would also activate a cinematic camera that would highlight the beauty of Los Santos as well as various tires. Also, Francisco's personal vehicles kept getting blown up, requiring insurance claims and taxi rides anyway. They weren't perfect, of course. Sometimes taxi drivers would become discouraged by tire-destroying gunfire and would kick Francisco out of their car as they sped away. Now I need to call another taxi. It would sometimes take half a dozen taxis to get from one destination to another, which would require a lot of patience on my part, not only having to call and wait for taxis intermittently throughout the trip, but also waiting as they figured out their paths, and then sometimes kick Francisco out when they couldn't. But, like I said, we are not seeking anything. Our existential freedom was an opportunity to embrace new and interesting opportunities as they arrive. Essentially, a deal with fate, with chaos, an agreement to enjoy existence on mine and Francisco's own terms, as long as we continued to choose to be here. So when he was abandoned by 2 taxis in a row in front of this nightclub, I accepted fate's opportunity to explore the space. The club in West Vinewood was so popular it was owned by at least 4 club owners. It did have a fun entrance, and even absent the likely copyrighted music, Francisco showed off moves I didn't know he had. He was told he could dance anywhere within the club's boundaries, and so we did that too. If we could express a video game simply as art distributed over time, then Francisco's opportunity to exist in this world was an opportunity to be an observer of art, to see the new buildings and interiors and vehicles that the game's designers populate what is essentially a museum. And one of the safest exhibits in the so-called museum, I think, was the casino. The casino is a fair place. The rules here apply to everyone equally, and after an initial $500 admission fee, Francisco could be paid daily to the tune of 1,000 chips. Membership would allow Francisco to spin the wheel once a day, and now with the introduction of this gathering place, he could maintain his social sense without competing in the cratocracy that was endlessly going on outside. Within the casino, there were many games: roulette, blackjack, poker, and slot machines.
Good luck.
And unfortunately, I realized that a master suite within the casino was something Francisco could really use, especially if he had any intention of spending time here. Now, what I'm going to show you might sound like gambling addiction or video game addiction or both, but is actually very scientific, let me assure you. Unlike traditional horse racing, the odds at the inside track betting course are relatively predictable. The odds of the horses are actually mathematically linked to their performance and the likelihood of Francisco's winning. Betting on the horse most likely to win, with odds as good as 1-1 and as far as 4-1, Francisco could slowly accumulate more chips, 1/32nd race at a time. There was a community race held every 5 minutes on the big screen, and then a personal race he could launch every 30 seconds. There were other patterns, like noticing when the top two competitors were evenly matched, often the second listed horse would win, as well as when the odds of the top horses dipped down too much, the third or fourth were suddenly viable. This was the first time Francisco could actually participate alone for personal gain, without risking the lives of himself or other people in the competitive marketplace. Ultimately, I believe the only reason we do anything is for increased personal relevance. When we jump into any game, we are looking to become more important in the eyes of others and within our own lives. We want progress more than we had before, and games give us objective measure of that progress, especially when they tell us we are winners. And when we become winners, we want games we win within to become more relevant themselves. The more time we play, the more powerful the game becomes. The more people playing the same game, the more valuable we become in their minds, and the more important we become around people. I think many people play games because they aren't finding enough relevance in their own worlds, or not finding fast enough relevance in spite of their efforts. They seek out worlds with faster and more progressive reward schedules. Fortunately, I've been trying to develop my patience, and I spent a lot of this process meditating, drinking coffee, while increasing and clicking the bid button. This behavior was very similar to any kind of data entry job, and honestly not fun on its own. Ultimately, Francisco was sitting at a computer in a cubicle setting, and I was doing this instead of experiencing my world or his. It took many hours, but eventually we turned the rewards of a particularly good lucky wheel spin into $1 million. Although it was somewhat mind-numbing, it was also an effective and peaceful way of growing in the world. I have to reinforce these horses were consistently aligned with their betting schedule, and this success was unlikely repeatable in any setting aside from this particular place. And also, legal disclaimer, Francisco and I are not financial advisors. Particularly evident when I proceeded to make some intentionally terrible bets to get the chip count down to 1 million even, because it looked cool. I went to check how much the Master Suite would cost, and it turns out that because I had taken so long to accumulate the winnings, the suites were actually on sale for a 40% discount. My initial design actually topped out at $2 million, including the lounge, media center, and spa, but because my initial goal of not spending money I brought into the casino, I decided to buy the base model for 750,000 chips. Francisco was more relevant than ever. He had access to the rooftop pool and flight deck above the only peaceful wealth generation building we had found. It was ironically raining when we bought it, Chaos's reminder of how I could now safely log out without the casino tossing him out into the street. I could have spent my earned cash on completing the suite, but I didn't know what the future would hold, and because I think Francisco might enjoy that spa, I sat back down and got to work.